The Galactic Engineering Assessment Bureau occupied 17 floors of crystalline perfection on Nexus Prime, where beings of supposedly superior intellect gathered to judge the mechanical aptitude of lesser species. Today's agenda featured what the Bureau's finest minds considered their most elegant solution to an ongoing administrative headache: how to definitively prove that humans belonged in the primitive tool user category, rather than the embarrassingly generous emerging technology-capable classification some bleeding heart xenobiologist had suggested. Director Vexstack adjusted his ceremonial measurement tools with the practiced smugness of someone who had never been wrong about anything, ever. His species, the HFY, had perfected the art of bureaucratic superiority across 14 millennia of galactic civilization. They possessed precisely calibrated limbs designed for handling delicate instruments, brains that processed calculations at quantum speeds, and most importantly, an unshakable conviction that their testing protocols were scientifically flawless. "The subject arrives in 30 standard time units," announced Assistant Evaluator Zilnoth, her 4 eyes glowing with anticipation. The Zephyrians were renowned throughout the galaxy for their engineering prowess, having constructed space elevators before most species discovered fire. Her confidence in today's proceedings bordered on the religious. All systems report optimal functionality. The containment barriers are reading at maximum structural integrity. The testing chamber represented the pinnacle of galactic engineering paranoia. Its walls consisted of titanium carbide composite, reinforced with quantum-locked molecular bonds, capable of withstanding direct impacts from small asteroids. The floor incorporated shock absorption matrices that could distribute the force of a thermonuclear explosion across 17 dimensions. Even the air recycling system had been ever-engineered to handle atmospheric disturbances that would liquefy most organic matter. Chief Materials Analyst Corvex ran his sensors over the equipment one final time, producing readings that would make a neutron star weep with envy. "The testing apparatus exceeds all safety parameters by factors of 10,000, he reported with the satisfaction of someone whose calculations had never encountered reality's sense of humor. "The pressure chambers can simulate the crushing depths of gas giant core. The electromagnetic generators produce fields strong enough to deflect solar winds. The mechanical stress components could challenge a planetary tectonic plate." The Bureau had spent 3 centuries perfecting these assessments. Every species that entered this chamber left with a precise classification that determined their place in galactic society. The Vorthen Collective earned master builders after their representative casually assembled a faster-than-light engine from spare parts. The Crystal Singers of Melodia achieved transcendent creators when their delegate grew a living spaceship using only meditation and ambient cosmic radiation. Humans, however, presented a unique challenge. Their technology seemed adequate enough. They had achieved crude interstellar travel and basic energy manipulation, but their biology suggested something far more disturbing. Early reports from first contact teams included alarming phrases like "survive direct atmospheric entry without protective gear," and requested extra gravity in their quarters because standard felt too comfortable. The Bureau's solution was characteristically elegant. Design tests so impossibly difficult that even the most generous observer would have to admit human limitations. The current chamber setup could accurately measure failure rates down to the molecular level, ensuring that when the human subject inevitably collapsed, crumbled, or simply expired from the impossibility of the challenges, there would be comprehensive documentation proving their species belonged firmly in the harmless but persistent category. Subject approaching the testing bay reported Security Coordinator Thexman, whose species had evolved from apex predators and thus appreciated the theatrical elements of controlled destruction. Preliminary biometric scans confirmed standard human physiology: single cardiovascular system, calcium-based skeletal structure, primitive nervous system running on electrical impulses. Nothing our instruments haven't encountered in 1,000 similar evaluations. The observation deck filled with Bureau officials, all eager to witness the definitive settlement of the human question. Betting pools had formed among the staff, though the odds were laughably one-sided. The longest anyone gave the human was approximately 4 minutes before complete physical breakdown. Through the reinforced viewing panels they watched their test subject enter the preparation chamber. She moved with the casual confidence of someone completely unaware that the next hour would determine her species' standing in galactic civilization. Her examination of the testing equipment displayed typical human curiosity, poking at interfaces, reading instruction panels, completely oblivious to the fact that she was surrounded by enough destructive potential to level a small city. All monitoring systems active, announced Technical Supervisor Rilevex. Structural integrity sensors online. Emergency medical protocols standing by. Cleanup crews have been notified to expect substantial biological debris. The human finished her preliminary inspection and approached the chamber entrance. The massive door, constructed from materials that could theoretically contain a supernova, dilated open with ceremonial grandeur. She stepped inside with the same nonchalant attitude someone might display when entering a public restroom. "Begin documentation protocol," ordered Director Vexsec, settling into his observation chair with the contentment of someone about to witness the universe confirming his worldview. Today we finally put the human question to rest. The chamber sealed with a resonant thrum that suggested finality. Above them, display screens flickered to life, showing stress measurements, atmospheric readings, and countdown timers that would mark exactly how long human arrogance could survive galactic reality. In the preparation area below, betting slips rustled as final wagers were placed. The shortest estimate was 90 seconds. The longest, placed by an optimistic junior technician who clearly hadn't read the species assessment reports, was a wildly generous 12 minutes. None of them bet on the human walking out intact while their testing chamber required complete reconstruction. The first challenge materialized with the theatrical flair that bureaucrats throughout the galaxy had perfected over millennia of making simple things unnecessarily complicated. A weight descended from the ceiling, 500 kilograms of compressed neutronium alloy wrapped in warning labels that practically screamed, "This will crush you into component atoms." The human regarded this mechanical death sentence with the mild interest one might reserve for an unexpectedly shaped cloud. She walked around the weight, examining it from various angles while the observation deck held its collective breath. Every alien present had run the calculations. 500 kilograms exceeded human muscular capacity by factors that made their computers display results in scientific notation followed by strings of exclamation points. "Subject studying the apparatus," reported Technical Supervisor Rilevex, his voice carrying the first hint of uncertainty. "Preliminary behavioral analysis suggests she may not understand the impossibility of the task." The human reached out and lifted the weight, not struggled with, not attempted to move it using leverage or technique, simply reached out with one hand as if picking up a moderately inconvenient grocery bag, and hoisted 500 kilograms of neutronium alloy above her head, while using her free hand to stifle a yawn. "Calibration error," announced Chief Materials Analyst Quathervex, his voice cracking slightly. "The gravity generators must be malfunctioning. Run a full diagnostic on the chamber's environmental control." The diagnostics returned results that would have made a probability calculator file a restraining order. Everything was functioning perfectly. The gravity was standard. The weight was exactly 500 kilograms. The human was still holding it above her head, while apparently contemplating the ceiling's architectural details. She set the weight down with the care someone might use when placing a delicate vase, then looked up at the observation windows with an expression that suggested she was waiting for something more interesting to happen. "Initiate Phase 2, ordered Director Vexsec, though his ceremonial measurement tools were beginning to tremble slightly in his precisely calibrated grasp. The pressure chamber activated with a satisfying mechanical whir that had been focus grouped across 17 species for maximum intimidation value. Atmospheric pressure inside the testing area increased to levels that could crush a battle cruiser's hull into decorative origami. The human stood in the center of this impossibility, looking around with the mild curiosity of someone experiencing a gentle spring breeze. "Perhaps she doesn't realize what's happening," suggested Assistant Evaluator Zilnoth, her 4 eyes blinking in patterns that indicated severe cognitive dissonance. Human nervous systems might be too primitive to register the pressure differential. The human stretched, performing what appeared to be casual calisthenics while surrounded by atmospheric conditions that should have compressed her into a sphere small enough to use as jewelry. She rotated her shoulders, cracked her knuckles, and then had the audacity to address the observation deck directly. "Is this supposed to be Her voice carried perfectly through the chamber's communication systems,
completely unaffected by the fact that she was speaking through air dense enough to swim in. Because I do my morning jogs in higher pressure than my home planet's atmosphere is basically soup compared to this gentle stuff. The betting pools on the observation deck had fallen silent. Junior technician Yilapex, who had optimistically wagered 12 minutes, was beginning to look like a prof. Phase 3, croaked security coordinator Thexmun, his apex predator instincts suddenly screaming warnings about being in the presence of something that defied every natural law he understood. The pulse generators hummed to life, producing fields so intense they could scramble the navigation systems of passing starships. Energy cascaded through the chamber in wavelength that existed in theoretical physics textbooks, but had never been observed outside laboratory conditions designed to simulate the interior of dying stars. The human stood in the center of this electromagnetic apocalypse and shivered slightly. "Oh, that's nice," she commented, her voice still perfectly clear despite being surrounded by energy fields that should have reduced her to her component particles. "It's all tingly, kind of like those massage chairs at the spaceport, but with more sparks. Can you turn it up a bit? This is barely registering on my skin." Every instrument on the observation deck was now displaying readings that violated several fundamental laws of physics. The electromagnetic field strength was sufficient to strip electrons from atomic nuclei. The pressure levels could liquefy diamond. The gravitational stress could bend spacetime into aesthetically pleasing knots. The human was asking for more intensity while apparently enjoying what amounted to a relaxing spa treatment. "This is impossible," whispered Chief Materials Analyst Corvex, his calculations having abandoned all pretense of making sense. "Our instruments must be malfunctioning. The readings suggest she's experiencing conditions that would destabilize matter at the quantum level." "The instruments are fine," replied Technical Supervisor Rilovex, his voice carrying the hollow tone of someone whose worldview had just been fed through a cosmic paper shredder. "I've run diagnostics 17 times. Everything is working perfect." The conditions inside that chamber could challenge a neutron star's structural integrity. The human had begun doing what appeared to be stretching exercises, moving through the destructive energy fields as if they were morning sunshine filtering through gossamer curtains. She bent and twisted with casual flexibility, completely unaware that she was treating forces capable of planetary renovation as background ambiance. "Phase 4, suggested Assistant Evaluator Zilnoth, though her voice carried the desperate quality of someone grasping for rational explanations in an increasingly irrational universe. "There is no Phase 4, admitted Director Vexak, his ceremonial measurement tools now vibrating at frequencies that suggested they were questioning their own existence. "We designed this test to be absolutely conclusive. 3 phases of escalating impossibility that would definitively demonstrate any species limitations." The human had apparently grown bored with her stretching routine, and was now examining the chamber walls with professional interest. She ran her hands along the titanium carbide composite barriers, tapping them experimentally and nodding with the satisfied expression of someone evaluating construction quality. "These barriers seem a bit thin," she called up to the observation deck. "And this composite material feels kind of brittle. Are you sure this is the good stuff? Because where I come from, we use materials like this for children's playground equipment." The observation deck had fallen into the sort of silence typically reserved for funeral services or impending cosmic disasters. Betting slips fluttered to the floor like autumn leaves as their carefully calculated predictions became irrelevant historical documents. The human continued her casual inspection of their indestructible testing chamber, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just invalidated 3 centuries of galactic engineering assessment protocols with the same nonchalant efficiencies someone might use to update their grocery list. The universe has a peculiar sense of humor, and it particularly enjoys the moment when absolute confidence encounters absolute reality. This cosmic joke was about to reach its punchline in the form of one increasingly frustrated human who had apparently decided that the Galactic Engineering Assessment Bureau's testing protocols needed some constructive criticism. "You know what?" the human announced, her voice carrying the tone of someone who had reached a decision that would probably require insurance claims. "I think your testing equipment might be broken. These challenges are so gentle they're practically therapeutic. Let me show you what proper stress testing looks like." Before anyone in the observation deck could process this statement or, more importantly, prevent its implementation, the human had walked over to the titanium carbide composite barrier and given it what she probably considered a gentle exploratory test. The barrier, which had been designed to withstand impacts that could crack continental plates, developed a spider web of fractures that spread outward like frozen lightning. The human examined her handiwork with the critical expression of someone evaluating a home improvement project. "Yeah, definitely substandard materials," she muttered, then proceeded to punch a hole through the barrier large enough to accommodate her fist. The edges of the opening glowed briefly from molecular friction, before cooling into twisted metal sculptures that would have won awards at avant-garde art exhibitions. "Emergency protocol," shrieked Technical Supervisor Rilvex, his voice reaching frequencies that threatened to shatter the observation windows. "Initiate emergency containment procedures. The structural integrity of the chamber has been compromised." The human, meanwhile, had moved on to examining the support pillars that held up the chamber's elaborate sensor array. These pillars consisted of solid steel reinforced with crystalline matrices that could theoretically support the weight of small moon. She wrapped her fingers around one of them and began bending it into increasingly artistic shapes while discussing Earth's meteorological pattern. "Back home we get these storm systems called hurricanes," she explained conversationally, as the pillar twisted into what might generously be called a pretzel shape. "Wind speeds can reach over 300 kilometers per hour. Makes the air feel thick and pushy, kind of like your pressure chamber, except with more rain and flying debris." The pillar, which had cost more than most planets' annual gross domestic product, was now forming geometric patterns that defied Euclidean geometry. The human had apparently decided it needed to be folded into a more compact configuration, and was working toward that goal with the methodical patience of someone following origami instructions. "The electromagnetic fields were nice too," she continued, casually rearranging several tons of reinforced steel while Security Coordinator Thexman made sounds that suggested his apex predator ancestors were filing formal complaints. "Reminded me of childhood games we used to play during electrical storms. We'd stand in open fields holding metal rods, trying to attract lightning strikes. Great fun, though the adults always got nervous about it for some reason." Chief Materials Analyst Corvex was staring at his instruments with the expression of someone whose fundamental understanding of reality had been replaced with abstract interpretive dance. His sensors were reporting material stress levels that required new mathematical concepts to express properly. According to every calculation he could perform, the human should have been reduced to her component atoms, approximately 17 different ways by now. Instead, she had moved on to the chamber's primary support beam and was testing its flexibility by bending it back and forth like a particularly sturdy tree branch. Each flex produced stress readings that made the monitoring equipment emit distressed electronic whimpering sound. "The thing about Earth materials," she said, working the support beam into increasingly impossible angles, "is that we learn to make things durable because everything on our planet is actively trying to destroy everything else. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, floods, droughts, ice ages, meteor impacts, you name a catastrophe, we've probably survived several of them." The support beam, which had been engineered to hold up structures capable of housing small civilizations, was now shaped like a question mark. The human seemed dissatisfied with this configuration, and was attempting to twist it into something that might pass for an exclamation point. "Our kids play games that would be classified as extreme sports on most worlds," she continued, completely unaware that she was casually redecorating a testing chamber worth more than some star system. "Jumping off cliffs into water, climbing vertical rock faces for entertainment, deliberately seeking out dangerous wildlife to observe up close. We consider it character building." Assistant Evaluator Zelnoth had progressed beyond traditional panic into a state of existential paralysis. Her four eyes were tracking the systematic destruction of equipment that represented the pinnacle of galactic engineering achievement, while her brain struggled to process the casual nature of this impossibility. "She's treating our most advanced materials like modeling clay," she whispered, her voice carrying the hollow quality of someone whose species' proudest achievements had just been relegated to the category of interesting but inadequate. The human had apparently decided that the chamber's floor needed some texture and was using her feet to create decorative patterns in the shock absorption matrices. Each step left impressions that revealed the complex crystalline structure beneath, transforming expensive engineering into abstract art installations. "Oh, and the weightlifting challenge," she said, glancing up at the neutronium alloy mass that had started this entire cascade of impossibility. "That was adorable. We have children who lift heavier things during playground activities, though I suppose if you're used to low-gravity environments, Anything over a few kilograms might seem challenging. She reached over and casually lifted the 500-kilogram weight again, this time using it to demonstrate proper form for what she called basic strength training exercise. The neutronium alloy, which had been forged in the heart of a collapsed star, was being used as a demonstration prop for human fitness routines. The key is proper breathing technique, she explained, using the impossibly dense weight to perform what appeared to be a series of casual arm curls, and making sure you warm up first. Though honestly, this weight is so light I'm not even feeling it in my muscles. Do you have anything heavier? Maybe in the 1,000-kilogram range? Director Vexthak had reached the stage of psychological breakdown where reality becomes negotiable. His ceremonial measurement tools lay scattered across the observation deck like the remnants of a shattered worldview. 3 centuries of carefully developed testing protocols were being demolished by one human who seemed to think she was being helpful. She's not malicious, he whispered to no one in particular. She genuinely believes she's demonstrating proper procedure. She thinks our equipment is defective because it's not challenging enough to register as actual testing. The human had finished her impromptu redecorating and was now surveying her work with the satisfied expression of someone who had successfully completed a minor home improvement project. The testing chamber, which had begun the day as a monument to galactic engineering precision, now resembled an abstract sculpture garden designed by someone with a very loose relationship with the laws of physics. There, she announced, dusting off her hands with the casual satisfaction of a job well done. That's more like proper stress testing. Your materials held up better than I expected, considering how thin and brittle they felt initially. With some upgrades to the structural composition, this could actually make a decent training facility. She looked up at the observation deck, where every alien present was experiencing some variation of species-wide existential crisis, and smiled with the innocent helpfulness of someone completely unaware that she had just rewritten several fundamental assumptions about the nature of matter, energy and cosmic justice. So what's next? Because I'm really hoping the advanced tests are more challenging than the warm-up exercises. The silence that followed the human's cheerful inquiry about advanced testing could have been bottled and sold as a premium meditation aid. It was the sort of profound quiet that occurs when an entire room full of supposedly superior beings simultaneously realizes that their fundamental understanding of the universe has been filed under adorably incorrect assumption. Director Vexthak stared at the twisted remains of what had once been the galaxy's most sophisticated testing facility and experienced what philosophers throughout the cosmos had long theorized but never witnessed: the complete inversion of intellectual certainty. His species had spent 14 millennia perfecting the art of measurement, classification and bureaucratic superiority. In the span of one afternoon, a single human had reduced their greatest achievement to what appeared to be an avant-garde installation piece, titled Abstract Thoughts on the Fragility of Hubris. Classification protocols, he whispered, his voice carrying the broken quality of someone whose life's work had just been reclassified as quaint historical curiosity. All of them. Every single species assessment we've ever conducted. They're all based on the assumption that our testing standards represent actual challenges, rather than, he gestured helplessly at the sculptural ruins below. Emergency response teams had arrived and were standing at the chamber's entrance, staring at the creative destruction, with the professional bewilderment of people whose training had not covered accidental redecorating by impossibly powerful aliens. Their equipment scanners were producing readings that suggested the laws of physics had taken an unscheduled vacation. Chief Materials Analyst Corvex had progressed beyond traditional scientific breakdown into a state that might generously be called constructive denial. He was frantically recalibrating his instruments, muttering calculations that increasingly resembled abstract poetry rather than mathematical formulas. His latest computation suggested that the human's casual destruction had released enough kinetic energy to power a small solar system for several standard years. Perhaps, he announced to the observation deck with the desperate optimism of someone clinging to the last fragments of his worldview, we are witnessing some form of advanced technology, microscopic enhancement devices, genetic modification beyond our current understanding. Surely no naturally evolved species could demonstrate such casual disregard for fundamental physical limitations. The human, meanwhile, had noticed the emergency response teams, and was approaching them with the helpful expression of someone who had spotted a problem that needed solving. The teams, composed of beings whose training had prepared them for containment breaches, toxic spills and minor dimensional instabilities, found themselves facing something far more terrifying: a politely concerned human who wanted to assist. "Oh, did I break something important?" she asked, her tone carrying genuine remorse as she surveyed the twisted metal sculptures that had once been precision engineering. "I'm really sorry about that. I was just trying to demonstrate proper stress testing techniques, but I think your materials might not be rated for standard Earth-level forces." Emergency Coordinator Flexstuff, whose species had evolved from creatures that could survive in the vacuum of space, took several steps backward and activated every protective protocol his suit possessed. The human's approach registered on his threat assessment systems as approximately equivalent to being pursued by a collapsing star with friendly intentions. "Standard Earth-level forces," repeated Technical Supervisor Rilvex, his voice carrying the hollow echo of someone whose professional expertise had just been redefined as charming incompetence. "She considers this level of destruction to be standard environmental conditions on her homeworld." Assistant Evaluator Zilnoth was methodically updating the human species classification in the Bureau's database, though her 4 eyes kept blinking in patterns that suggested severe cognitive overload. The classification had begun as primitive tool user, and had evolved through emerging technology capable moderately dangerous, extremely hazardous, and was currently settling somewhere around cosmic force of nature disguised as bipedal mammal. "The entire galactic classification system," she announced with the clinical detachment of someone whose sanity had temporarily relocated to a safer dimension, "will require complete revision, not just for humans, but for every species we have ever assessed. Our testing protocols have been measuring everyone against standards that apparently qualify as recreational activities for Deathworld inhabitants." The human had finished her inspection of the emergency response team's equipment and was shaking her head with the disappointed expression of someone who had encountered yet another example of substandard engineering.
"Your protective suits are really thin,"
she observed, tapping one of the emergency responders' helmets with a finger that produced stress fractures in materials designed to withstand direct meteor impacts. "And these scanners look like they might break if you handle them too rough. Do you guys not have proper safety equipment? Because working in hazardous environments without adequate protection seems pretty dangerous." Security Coordinator Thexman had reached the philosophical conclusion that his apex predator instincts were filing for immediate retirement. His species had evolved to recognize and respond to threats, but their evolutionary programming had never anticipated the need to classify helpful concern as a potentially extinction-level event. The human had apparently decided that the emergency response team needed better equipment and was examining their various tools with the critical assessment of someone evaluating items at a particularly disappointing hardware store. Each device she handled developed minor structural improvements that looked suspiciously like the early stages of complete mechanical failure.
"I could help you build better versions of these," she offered with the generous spirit of someone completely unaware that her assistance might result in technological advances that would destabilize galactic civilization. "Back home, we learned to make tools that can survive pretty much anything: earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, direct lightning strikes, accidental encounters with various forms of wildlife that consider most construction materials to be dietary supplements." Director Vexthak had reached the final stage of bureaucratic enlightenment. The recognition that his entire career had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of cosmic proportions. The Galactic Engineering Assessment Bureau had been designed to categorize species based on their ability to handle challenges that, according to human standards, barely qualified as mild inconveniences. "The irony," he murmured to himself with the philosophical acceptance of someone whose worldview had been thoroughly composted, "is that we were supposed to be assessing her, determining her species' capabilities and limitations, establishing their proper place in galactic society." The human had finished her helpful examination of the emergency equipment and was looking around for other ways to be useful. Her gaze fell on the observation deck, where the assembled aliens were experiencing various forms of species-wide existential recalibration. "Hey," she called up to them with the friendly wave of someone who had just completed a successful day's work. "Thanks for the workout. It's been a while since I've had a chance to do proper stretching exercises. When do we start the actual testing? 'Cause I'm really looking forward to seeing what you consider genuinely challenging." The observation deck maintained its profound silence as every being present simultaneously realized that the question they had intended to answer, "What are humans capable of?" had been replaced by a far more disturbing inquiry: "What aren't humans capable of?" Assistant Evaluator Zilnoth looked up from her database updates. where the human classification had evolved beyond traditional categories and was now simply listed as yes, followed by several pages of concerned asterisks. "I believe," she announced with the calm precision of someone whose job description had just been fundamentally redefined, "we may need to reassess our entire understanding of what constitutes a standard sentient species." The human waved goodbye with cheerful politeness and walked toward the exit, leaving behind a testing facility that would require complete reconstruction, a bureaucracy in the midst of philosophical collapse, and the growing suspicion that perhaps the real test had been whether galactic civilization could handle the existence of humans, rather than whether humans could handle galactic civilization. The betting pools, scattered across the observation deck floor like the remains of shattered assumptions, suggested that everyone had been asking the wrong questions from the very beginning. The universe, meanwhile, continued its ancient tradition of finding these situations absolutely hilarious.